Hi, I'm Wendy from Hillstart Nutrition, Health and Wellness, and welcome to the Are You Really Going to Eat That podcast. I am a huge foodie and I'm also a qualified nutritionist. And I started this podcast because I really wanted to talk about food quite a lot actually, but also it was really important for me to help people cut through the headlines. There is constant contradictory noise around food and nutrition. And in this podcast, I give you my honest opinion, my hopefully educated opinion. I also interview some experts and also some great foodies as well. The purpose of this is to give you those facts and those tools so you can go away and apply them to your own diet and the food that you eat, and hopefully give you some inspiration along the way. It comes with a word of warning though, don't listen while you're hungry. Welcome to episode 58, and this week we have an interview with the amazing Lucy Rose Metcalfe from Lucy Rose Coaching. She's got, I won't say a fabulous story, that seems like the wrong kind of terminology to use it, but it is, an amazing story, and I knew a little bit about her journey. We met through a coach that we were both working with at the time, Zara Mosley, and I really wanted to get Lucy on the podcast, firstly because I wanted to find out more about what had happened to her, and I think she has a story that needs to be shared. She was quite young and diagnosed with a really significant brain tumour. She was super healthy at the time. She was a professional dancer up until her late 20s, and I think still now would probably kind of still sort of call herself a dancer. She's extremely healthy, very vibrant young person still, and to have this horrendous thing happen to her, I just couldn't believe it. She is so positive, so powerful, and she has created a 7 steps coaching program where she wants to help other people. Particularly, she wants to talk to people who've suffered brain injuries and now suffer with epilepsy like she does, and the epilepsy is actually as a result of the tumour and the operation and the ongoing sort of procedures that she had to go through. But actually, if I'm honest, Lucy's 7 steps apply to us all, every single one of us. She does them daily. And I think if we all just took a little bit of time every day and thought a little bit more about our health and our wellness, then okay, we don't have to do them like Lucy does to ensure we don't have a seizure, but actually to improve our wellness overall. She's got it right. She really has. So yeah, it's an amazing journey. Listen in. I think you will be very surprised. And I would really recommend, if you can, I know this is a podcast, so this is an unusual, and I don't say this very often, but actually, if you can go and watch this on YouTube, I have a YouTube channel, Hillstart Nutrition. If you can watch this on, I would do, because I think seeing Lucy and how vibrant and how well she looks is even more shocking for her story. But if you can't and you're listening with your earbuds, just have a look at a later date. So here's today's interview with Lucy. So Lucy, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here, Wendy. I'm really excited.
And me. So last time I spoke to Lucy, we spoke for about an hour and a half. So we will try and keep it a little bit shorter today.
Try.
Lucy, try. So Lucy, if you can just, I've given you a bit of an intro, but if you'd like to introduce yourself to the listeners and just tell them a little bit about your journey and kind of how we've connected and your reasons for coming on here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So my name is Lucy Metcalfe. And I'm setting up because it's kind of a 10-year anniversary of my brain tumour growth, whatever you want to call it. And we met very fortunately through Zara Mosley. I was just recently doing her online course creation. I'm still plodding away at that. And that's how we met on our Zoom calls. And I think, you with your nutrition and me with my fitness type-esque stuff, obviously connected, and I think that's how I'm here today.
Definitely, yeah, and we really did connect, didn't we? So thank you, Zara. We'll put a link to Zara. Zara has her own podcast, which I've been on a couple of times, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So you sort of sort of said a little bit about that it's your 10-year anniversary. So we're going to go back a bit further at some point, but for now, let's just go back 10 years. And can you explain what happened? So this month, 10 years ago, so this month is a really important month to you, isn't it? October, what were we, 2020? So 2010, I had to work out what year it was then, sorry. So October 2010, tell everybody what happened.
So October 2010, I was living in Dubai. My sister had moved over there, and then I'd followed over when I stopped being a professional dancer full time. So then I was teaching English as a foreign language in a really big organisation. And basically what happened was, when I was speaking, I couldn't finish my sentences. And I was like, okay, this isn't just tiredness. This is something quite serious. And I knew it was serious instantly. So I had some tests done, and October 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with a growth on my brain. And it was really, really insane. I can still remember to this day the doctor sitting me down and saying, okay, Lucy, you don't have a tumour and you don't have cancer. And I said, and now you're going to tell me what I do have. And he said, that's right. And I just kind of took this deep breath, and he said, you have a growth and it's fatal. We have to operate. So I was like, oh my goodness. And so October 2010, I flew back to the UK, and then I was waiting for this brain surgery up until January. And yeah, so it's literally 10 years ago to the month when I was diagnosed and flew back to the UK. And then unfortunately, they wanted, and I had a second opinion with another surgeon, to do open brain surgery. That would have been the quickest and most efficient way to deal with it. But it was too embedded. It was so entangled that they said, we will actually cause you like severe brain damage. You might go into a coma. It could be absolutely fatal. So we're going to do radiosurgery. It will take up to 4 years to eradicate. And then after that, you should be fine. Fortunately, unfortunately, it hasn't been so fine, and it has been what I call a 10-year challenge. But now I am fighting fit, I'm really pleased to say.
You definitely are. And my heart just goes out to you. As you're saying that, I want to gasp out loud. It must have been so scary. I mean, we're gonna talk about your life prior to that, but you are a healthy person now, and you were very healthy before, and that must have been. I mean, how old were you? If you don't mind telling us, how old were you when you were diagnosed?
So I was 33.
So 33, and you're told you've got a growth on your brain, and that they're going to do surgery, that this is like serious, and it's going to take up to 4 years to go. That must have been horrendous. And having that time, I mean, how did you cope mentally in that October to January period? Just give us a little insight. How did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, it was really tough. I think initially there was the just initial shock of, oh my goodness, this doesn't happen to me. These things happen to other people that you read about, that you see, that you hear. These are the things that just don't happen to you. So you get your head around that. Then I went back to the UK, and truthfully, I'd been living in the Middle East, and I look like I'm somebody who loves the sun and being on the beach and quite a free spirit. And then I went back to the UK, and 10 years ago, it was a particularly kind of wet and grey winter. I was living with my mum and dad, and I was just waiting day in, day out to find out when my surgery was. And I just wasn't getting answers. And also during that time, they kept having more and more meetings, because in the UK, the surgeons again were having big meetings about, actually, should we do open brain or should we do embolization? And very briefly, embolization is where they stick a kind of tube up into your head through your hip, I believe, and they kind of glue your vessels. And I said, what are the risks with that? Because that was an option. And they said, well, the risk is sometimes it can glue the wrong vessels in your brain. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So
sorry,
yeah, it was a
it's
really
not funny, but I'm like laughing, and I'm like, that's awful.
I know It is, and it's quite shocking to hear, because you're like, I had three choices. It was open brain, but they said no. It was embolization, but they said we might actually mistakenly glue the wrong, vessels and leave you paralyzed, etc. Or you've got radiosurgery, which it's basically like you have a helmet drilled into your skull. You lie in a machine, very much like an MRI machine. You have a high dose. I had a high dose for an hour and a half. So it's kind of like chemo, but rather than constant, weekly or monthly sessions, it was for an hour and a half all at once. And yes, my hair fell out in that particular area afterwards, which looked quite funny actually, because it was just one round little area rather than my whole hair. But yeah, then the other option was, well, you have radiosurgery, but it can take up to 4 years. But it might just take 2 years. So when I flew back to Dubai and went back straight away into teaching, basically every year I was going for an annual MRI checkup. And for the first year, it hadn't shrunk at all. The second year, it had shrunk somewhat. And I'm thinking all the time, yes, it's going to be, just 2 years for me. Year 3, it's looking really good, Lucy. Just hang on near it, hang on in a little bit longer. And then year 4, yes, it's gone, which was really, so brilliant. But that led to other complications as well. I thought it was over then, and unfortunately it wasn't. But going back, sorry, Wendy, to your initial question, how was my mind then? It was pretty up and down, I think sometimes when you're going through something, you just go through it.
Yeah.
Survival kicks in, and it is what it is. And when I came back to Dubai, yes, sorry, no, carry on.
Sorry, I said, and you're very positive, aren't you? So I can imagine you just kind of like, let's get on with it, let's do it. And so that's a great go-get-em attitude. But yeah, to spend 4 years in limbo to sort of say, it's getting a bit better, it's been a bit better. And I suppose there always must be that thought that, well, is it, what if next time it gets bigger? It must have been a very difficult time to deal with it. So
well, yeah, and actually the final part of that I forgot to add was that they said actually it's up to 4 years, and then we review it in 4 years, and if it's not fully gone, we may then do open brain surgery at that point. We'll pluck it out because it'll be far smaller. So I kind of had that to look forward to as well. And there are always complications, so it is a kind of strange place. Like you said, you're kind of living in limbo for a number of years. And like you said, I am positive. And sometimes during that time, I was literally couldn't have been healthier and happier for 6 weeks at a time, and then boom, out of the dark, I would just have the worst day possible, without being dramatic. But there'd be days that I just could not get out of bed. My head would be banging. I couldn't think, I couldn't speak. It's like your body has betrayed you. You just can't trust it.
Oh, horrible. Bless you. And so I want to talk a little bit more about your journey after the end of those 4 years, but I think let's go back a little bit, because if anyone's watching this video, so this is obviously this is a podcast, so it's voice, but we have video this as well, and I'd encourage you to go and check out on YouTube, because Lucy's a very healthy person, beautiful hair. I can't imagine having a big bald patch on that gorgeous hair, but actually I think this is kind of, for me, I would have been frustrated if I was you, because you are healthy, you have always looked after yourself. So you were a professional dancer in your early career, weren't you? So let's talk about that, sort of your journey. So frustrating, you've been super healthy, super fit, things like that don't happen to people like you. But let's go back, because I think this is part of the interesting part of the journey. So you said to me that when you grew up, your parents were, so food is always my thing. So I'm going to kind of go down the food aspect a little bit. So when you grew up, you said to me that your parents are both chefs. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, practically. They were both hoteliers. So my dad had trained, And then they both were able to cook. And, my mum kind of did the puddings because we had one hotel. She did the puddings. My dad was the hotel owner and manager, or they were both the owner, I suppose. But yeah, they could just rustle up anything at any time of day, unlike myself.
But I think that was one of the things that I was really interested is that you've always been quite interested in food, and then always been very healthy, very active, and then you went into dancing. So tell us about your dancing career. How long were you a dancer for?
So I gave up at the ripe old age. I was just so ancient at 27, so I thought, and regretted it ever since.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was 3 when I started dancing. So in the hotel where the hotel that my parents owned, right opposite was the British Legion, a big hall, and I could hear this music being played. And as soon as I was 3 and eligible, we signed up there, and I started doing ballet and tap and what have you. And then I carried on, did all my ballet, tap, modern exams, through school years. And then at 18, I went to Newcastle College to do performing arts dance. And then at 19, 20-ish, I went to Northern School of Contemporary Dance in Leeds and did my professional training there. And then from there, I literally was like, right, I'm leaving the country. I'm going to live somewhere warm-ish. Went to Disney, Paris.
Oh, cool.
So I was there for a while, which was great. And then I was really fortunate. I was offered a job from there to go to do a tour of Germany, doing all styles of dance with a full orchestra. It was fantastic. That was 6 months. And then I was a cheerleader back in London for the London Broncos and Richard Branson's Virgin Company. I did MSC cruises. I was a cruise ship dancer and singer. Spanish circus, illusionist. Yeah, the list goes on, but it was fabulous.
Love it. And I think the reason I asked you that is because I think it's really important to kind of, and part of your journey was that actually, like you said, things like that don't happen to people like you. You were fit, you were healthy, you were active. That was your job, and then to kind of find out that you get ill at 33, you kind of assume that it happens. And it's not fair. It can happen to anyone, but we do assume that it's not gonna happen to healthy people, is it? It happens to people who, don't do any exercise and don't have a very good diet and don't understand about food and nutrition. Not, lovely, glamorous people who are dancing for a living. That doesn't happen to people like you. So it must have been a shock for family as well. Did they, was there kind of, so were you married at the time? I know you're married now. Were you married at the time?
No, in fact, just putting that totally into context, exactly what you said, Wendy. I gave up dancing at 27 full-time professionally, and then I moved to Dubai because my sister was married and living there. And I thought, well, if I'm not going to dance, I'll go there and try something new. And then after a couple of years, I got into teaching English as a foreign language because I was qualified to, basically my parents said, you can do all the dancing in the world that you want, but you have to have a plan B. So they made me do TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language. So I went to Dubai, got into that. And in the meantime, I was always taking professional dance classes and I was being asked to perform for things. So even though I wasn't working full time as a dancer, in Dubai, I was still getting corporate gigs. So I still identified as a dancer. I did a weekend 2-day gala in Dubai with Shamila Dance. And then I jumped on a flight and I went to Zimbabwe and I did teaching in the community with one of my friends from Northern School of Contemporary Dance. And that's how fit I was, literally, dancing a 2-day gala, then jumping on a flight, flying to Zimbabwe, and then dancing for 10 days there. And during that time, again, I started to have these symptoms, thinking, what is happening? This doesn't happen to me. Actually, this is interesting. I thought it has to be my diet, or it has to be that I'm not sleeping enough, or it has to be that I had one too many vinos last night. But unfortunately, it was neither of those. Although having said that, now I know that those things are really important either to do or not to do.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's the key, isn't it? Although you were, like you said, you still identified as a dancer, even though if you were working teaching English, that was still your aim, and you were very active and very healthy. Let's just talk about the diet a little bit, because I think that's really important. Is, you know, I hear this a lot of people who suffer with like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. So a couple of weeks ago, I had a friend on, Jess, and you know, there's often a pattern that hindsight is a wonderful thing, but we can see those signs coming up. So let's talk a little bit about the diet. So as a child, I ate really healthy, you know, lots of parents were big cooks, so I know we talked about this, lots of butter, lots of fat, lots of light. And then you became a dancer and kind of, let's say, more aware of your diet, although actually now we know that not necessarily. So tell me about your diet when you were a dancer. What was the aim, or, you know, what did you need to maintain?
Well, so going back to the actual dance training, we were dancing 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So literally for me then, food was fuel, and I could eat anything and just burn it. But then when you go into the professional realm, you are most of the time dancing 1 or 2 hours a day max. So that changes. And I'm going to be really honest here. When I got to that place of thinking, oh, I can't actually just stuff food down my neck anymore and burn it off because I'm only doing 2 hours a day, not 8. I then, in that phase, it was very common to have that fat-free diet, that low-fat diet, and the Atkins diet. And it was the time when all the models were kind of size 0. And I was considered, truthfully, big. I was a size 10, 12 max. And I was big. I used to get told, the other girls on the dance ship, you know, on the cruise ship, just be careful because they're like a size 8 and you're kind of bigger. Now I look at myself as a size 12 and I'm like, I love what I see. But back then it was so different. So my diet, I'll be really specific, because the cruise ship really was a time when I recognized everything I ate. I went by calories. I got really into understanding calorific kind of, you know, quantities. And so mixing that, unfortunately, with the Atkins diet meant that in general, I would wake up 11 o'clock in the morning in the cabin in the ship with my best friend, Shelley. And we would go for breakfast, and I would have one bowl of, you know, those kind of small cornflake packs.
That don't
The
feed a
individual
3-year-old,
ones.
do they? I'd want like 3 of them.
Exactly. Now I'd be like, oh, it's like cardboard, you know, give me more. I would have one of those with semi-skimmed milk. I think I just never really liked the taste of fully skimmed, but that would have been probably my ideal. And then for lunch, it would be kind of meat and salad. And for dinner, meat and salad. And anything that was white or beige, carb-wise, was just a no-go zone. And yeah, I lost weight. I went down to probably one of my lowest weights. And I was kind of just, there was literally no fat on me. You know, even just like when you sit down and you might have a little fold, I was just so proud because I didn't have that anymore. And looking back, that's really sad. And a further truth is that when the hunger pangs came, because of course, after you're dancing, you're like, okay, I'm starving now. It would be have a cigarette, have a drink, you know, to just starve that pain. Yeah, starve that hunger. Not a great diet looking back, and didn't do much for the body.
Yeah, and I think this is, you know, who knows what damage it does. And we're not saying for the first minute that it caused the tumour, but, you know, all these things could be contributing factors, couldn't they? That, you know, smoking at the time and low fat. And, you know, we're going to talk about your steps in a bit and how it's changed, but just really want to hone down on this because, you know, there is an honesty that you've given us, so thank you for that. And obviously as a woman we need, well, everyone needs fat, but, you know, fat is good fat is good for us, and it's particularly good for our hormones as well, and it's protection. So you would have lost weight, you know, potentially you would have been taking fat, you know, that was protective for your organs, but also lack of fat means we're not creating hormones. And Lucy, what happens, you know all too well. So share with if you don't mind sharing with the listeners what you shared with me.
So unfortunately, when I had this very low fat diet and kind of Atkinsy as well, I just stopped menstruating for 5 whole years.
Shocking,
To the
isn't it?
point, yeah. And, you know, when I told my mum, she was like, oh my goodness, you know, and I would have been late 20s at that point. And she said, let's get you checked up. And I was getting checked for endometriosis and everything was coming back normal. So it was like, okay, what's wrong with you? And then strangely, of course, when I stopped that particular contract and moved in with mum and dad, the cooks, the chefs, eating the full fat cream, butter, but in small doses, the hormones obviously worked and the periods came back month 1 of living back home.
Wow, that's a quick change, isn't it? And I think this is the thing, you
Yeah.
know, as a woman, you know, periods are a bit of an inconvenience. And if you're dancing as well,
Oh, yeah.
you know, actually it's,
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure there must have been some part of it saying, you know, well, actually that's great. I don't have to worry about it. But actually we don't think about the fact that we're meant to have that. It's part of that, you know, that natural cycle. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And you know, if there's anyone listening and it resonates with them, maybe that will just prompt them to have a little bit of a think about, you know, what is it doing, and the long term, you know, long-term effects of these things that we just don't know what's going to happen. So let's jump then to, so you've had the operation 10 years ago. You posted an amazing picture recently on social media of you with this like enormous mask thing on from the operation. That was shocking. So I would like to share that with people. No, I think it's brilliant because I think it just goes, you know, it goes to show what you've been through, because I think you look so well and healthy now that it's really important to kind of keep reminding your people, you know, what you've come through and what you continue to have to do to ensure your health and wellness now. So it's not like you had the operation 4 years later, given the all clear, and I'm good to go. You've spent a long time putting some really important things into place to make sure that you can come on this podcast and you can have a job, and we'll talk about your future, you know, your future plans and stuff. So tell us about what you do now and how you find those. So you call them your 7 steps, don't you, I think?
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah, and it just kind of came about by default, really. So yeah, after I had the all clear as such 4 years ago, we might get onto it later, but it wasn't really clear.
No.
There were complications afterwards. And so last year, I finally kind of took the bull by the horns and said, I have to find answers. And I basically went to the hospitals, to the doctors, surgeons, consultants, and got answers and found out that with other things as well, I have epilepsy for life and some slight brain injury, which affects my memory and, you know, certain things just a bit more hard work, let's say. So between last year and the 4 years prior to that, and even now this year as such, I've kind of just compiled all of the knowledge and information that I found out about myself and what works. So really briefly, for me, it's kind of 7 steps to wellness and recovery. And quite interestingly, I recognized after we spoke that the very first one that I found out works for me is nutrition and hydration. It wasn't even exercise and dance, it was nutrition and hydration. So for me, it was about feeding my body and also feeding my brain, because what I fed my body didn't necessarily feed my brain well. So for me, like you've already mentioned, it's healthy fat. That really works for me. The next step I found definitely for my mental health, like my mind, was exercise. And I did have anxiety and depression through the years. And even last year, I definitely had anxiety. And so doing the exercise in all forms, whether it's dance or HIIT classes or Pilates or yoga, it was the breathing that really helped me. And that reduced my anxiety. I recognized like pretty instantly, oh gosh, I feel better. And it was the breathing as well as the exercise and the music that I love as well. The next step, step 3 for me is sleep and rest. So the surgeons, the consultants definitely said that anybody suffering with any kind of brain or neuro injury, there are certain triggers, and 3 of them, the top 3, I think generically, are sleep, So we need to have as much sleep as we possibly can all the time, like not just in recovery, but kind of for the rest of your life, pretty much, to maintain a healthy brain. And also no alcohol or limited alcohol. So I chose at a certain time, it was a bit of a bad day, that was the last time I was ever going to be able to drink, because I could not feel like that ever again. I was kind of scared for my life. And the other one is viruses. So we have to make sure that we do everything we possibly can to avoid contracting a virus. And the reason being is that I think it attacks us a bit more than the normal person, the average person. So yes, I give myself, like, honestly, I give myself about 10 hours in bed to make sure that I get 8 to 9 hours sleep a night. And also power naps. Oh my goodness. For me, we're all different. Oh my goodness, come 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, when I'm dipping, if I have a quick cuppa, lie down for 20 minutes, I wake up and I just feel like a different person. And my brain has rested. And I think that could apply to anybody, like, just have a kip.
I love that. Lucy's motto, have a kip.
Have a kip, absolutely. In fact, I pretty much live next door to a neuro doctor. She's a good friend now. And yeah, I'm so fortunate. And I'll sometimes text her, in pre-COVID times, and say, do you fancy a walk? She's like, Lucy, mate, I'm having a kip. I've got to rest my brain. She's a neuro doctor, so that says everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, if she said it's all right, it must be.
Absolutely. And then for me as well, going through what I've gone through, and looking after my health, which for me is the mental, physical and emotional side of health. For me, relationships and boundaries, I really had to monitor my relationships and put boundaries into place. And then I had to look at my career and purpose. And I think that, everybody needs to make sure that they're kind of on the right track and being true to themselves and their values. And then spirituality or self-belief. So I actually, I'm a kind of committed Christian, and I really believe that, having a faith really helped me in my darkest times. And there were a few of those. But also, alongside that, all of us, we need to have self-belief and believe that we have got the power to get through these tough times. We've got through them before, we'll get through them again. But also, like you keep picking up on, for me, I thought, oh my goodness, these things don't happen to me. So for a big health issue like this, it was my first time. I had been fit as a fiddle, dancing around the world, up till 5, 6 a.m. And all of a sudden I was really, really seriously unwell. And so I just thought, right, I've not been here before, but I am making a choice to be happy. I'm going to be healthy and I'm going to find healing. I have got to make this work. And then the last one for my, 7 steps to wellness and recovery is hobbies and well-being. I think that when we do things that spark joy in our lives with the people that we love, doing what we love, it just gives us such a good warm sense of well-being. And when you take those things away, I think you also really recognize how much you need them. So those are, pretty much my 7 steps, really.
and I love those. Lucy, I just love your positivity of everything you've been through. This is a 10-year journey to get you where you are now. But actually, you know what? That's 7 steps that everyone needs. This is something that we can all learn from. I know that you're looking to help people who've, had similar experiences, but actually there's nothing in there that I wouldn't say we would all benefit from doing more of. I don't think we just taking that time to think about what makes us well. Just 7 great steps. So if anyone takes any, write them down and remember them, because it applies to every single one of us. And I'm with you on the sleep, definitely. That's kind of like, that would be even though I'm a nutritionist, I think I would sometimes put sleep over nutrition. So being a bit controversial there.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think one of the things with sleep is that if we don't get enough sleep, as human beings, the next day we're just pretty feral, really. I mean, I know I am.
Yeah.
And then if you don't get the sleep, you cheat on the food that you've planned. Everything just goes out the window. Your mood is foul. your relationships don't go to plan. So I think you're right. I think sleep is like the number one priority, I suppose.
Has to be, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Has to be. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about your a brief. I know it's quite complicated, but you know, from those 4 years to now. So as you said, you now have epilepsy. That is a condition that you are going to live with for the rest of your life, and that was
Yes.
part of that journey to. Would that be fair to say that was part of the things that you had to accept? That was at the end of the 4 years when you kind of expected to. It was almost like ticking the box. Yeah, no more tumour. Off I go back to my life as it was before.
Mm-hmm.
That was when actually the real journey started, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So from after the 4 years, what actually happened was they said, right, you've got the all clear, brilliant. So they started to reduce me off the medication. And from day one, when I'd been diagnosed, they said, right, because of the location of the growth on your brain, we have to put you onto anti-epileptic medication because it's in that area. But you're not epileptic, we're just putting you on it as a preventative measure. So the whole time I was on that, when I got the all clear, they said, right, we're going to slowly decrease it. And so I was in Dubai at the time, living alone. And I was on the lowest dosage of 250 milligrams. And I had a seizure in a restaurant. And I got to the hospital. I don't recall any of it. And I had another seizure. And I'm going to be really honest, because I think that, you know, I didn't know anything about seizures and what happens. I had wet myself, and I'd found out that the people in the restaurant had put a spoon in my mouth to stop me chewing, but those things are kind of not to be done anymore. So it's about the awareness too that I want to bring to people regarding epilepsy. And so they put me back onto the anti-epileptic medication. And then for the next 4 or 5 years, believe it or not, I didn't know that I was epileptic. I just thought, oh, okay, now I've also got, you know, this kind of scar tissue on the brain. And that apparently is what's causing me to feel unwell. So they're keeping me on the medication just to make sure that I'm all right. But I'm not epileptic. I've just got this scar tissue. So it was all of these years that I was just up and down. And truthfully, there were times again that I just couldn't make full sentences. And there were times that I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't even remember at one point the word face. I said to my sister, what, you know, this skin on your head where you put makeup. She's like, your face. And I was like, oh yeah, that's it. And I said, even just, you know, a couple of years ago to my husband, I said, you need to put the food in that machine. And he was like, what? So I said, the one that's hot. He's like, an oven? I was like, no, it's in the wall. Oh, the microwave. And, you know, it's like the simplest words you just can't remember. So I really knew again that there was something wrong. So last year I went back to the consultants and said, please just find out what's wrong with me. And it was only then by having a number of cognitive skills tests that I found out that I had some brain injury and also the epilepsy for life. So, and what they actually realized was that the whole time my medication had been too low. And for anybody with epilepsy, if you're having symptoms, well, actually, I'm not a doctor, sorry, I take that back. For me, they said, Lucy, if you are ever having any symptoms, it means your medication isn't high enough. And we're going to have to increase it 250 milligrams each time you feel, as I call it, unwell. And that has happened at least twice now. So I'm back on kind of full medication. And yeah, that's where I am now, kind of 1,000 milligrams in the morning, 1,000 in the evening, probably for the rest of my life. But I function so well now. It's great.
So pragmatic about this. I think that's just so you as well, that you kind of like, you know, you didn't know you had epilepsy. I think I get that. I would be like you. I would expect to be healed at some point. You know, you kind of like, I've been in, I've had an operation, I've got a tumour, you know, I've had this, you know, at some point this will all go away and I will be, you know, well again and it will be normal again. And so then to find out not. But tell me about the epilepsy drugs. So obviously they're working there, controlling the fits and stuff. And I'm going to come back to epilepsy a little bit in a minute because I'd like some tips off you. But do you get side effects from the drugs? Are you going to have to, will you get used to them? Will you have to increase the dose at some point? Is that how it works?
So I'll kind of just briefly take you very briefly through the journey. So the first time that I ever took the anti-epileptic medication when I was diagnosed, I slept solidly for 13 hours. So that might give you some indication of probably the sedative in there
Yeah.
for the brain. So that was me. And then I had to kind of get accustomed to it. And one of the frustrations for me going through my journey was that the medication gives you virtually the same side effects as the symptoms.
That happens a lot. You'd be
So,
surprised. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. No.
Well, it's so frustrating because you don't know whether you're having a mini seizure and you're really dizzy and shaky and trembling because of a seizure, or actually the doctor might then say, no, sorry, that's a side effect.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh gosh. So that takes time to get used to as well, to differentiate between the side effects of the medication and an actual symptom of what you're going through. I then, to combat that or to kind of overcome it, I had to work out what my triggers were and kind of keep a note of everything, like, had I slept well? What had I eaten? What was my environment? How stressed was I? And then I was able to differentiate between what was potentially a seizure or a partial seizure. Yeah, partial, I should say. I'd never, have had very few full seizures, but these partial seizures which just come and go, as opposed to taking your medication and then feeling a bit trembly and what have you, afterwards, or when the medication is running out, or when it's too low.
And
Yeah,
I
so
suppose
and
that's
it's
your,
confusing.
yeah, I can imagine. And I suppose that's your 7 steps, isn't it? So now you help
Mm.
people, you're kind of the new Lucy. It helps people kind of understand their own epilepsy and these 7 steps, don't you? So tell us about what's happening to you in the future now. Let's talk about the exciting stuff.
Oh, exciting times. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, it is really exciting. I think to mark the 10 years, I was then obviously, strangely, when I was a student at Northern School of Contemporary Dance, I lived in Headingley in Leeds, where, if you might know Headingley, listeners from the, I was going to say golf. No, it's not golf.
Cricket.
It is cricket.
Cricket.
Yes, thank you.
Similar.
Yeah, very. And there is a charity there called the Yorkshire Brain Tumour Charity. And I decided to do, to mark the event of the 10 years, to kind of say thank you to people and to the surgeons and the people that also helped me pay for the surgery that I had to pay for in the end, because I'd been living outside the UK. I then thought, right, I have to do something really big. So I'm going to do this 10K run. And also, sorry, truthfully, I've done that Lucy thing and I can't remember the question. And this is a prime example of what happens to me with a little bit of brain injury.
No worries. Well, let's reframe it actually, because I liked where you were going with that. So I'll ask the other one in it. So tell us about what you're doing to commemorate your 10-year anniversary. Let's do that first.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the reminder. Oh dear. So yeah, I just really thought I want to help people. What I've gone through has taken 10 years. It probably didn't have to take that long. So I am a trainer, a coach, qualified, doing that kind of corporate wise. So I thought I want to kind of take that experience that I have and put it into, wellness and help people that have gone through what I've gone through. So I've written, an ebook with the 7 steps. I've created an online course, basically called 7 Steps to Find Your Personal Wellness and Recovery. And then I really just want to help people, through life coaching, through wellness. I want to blog, ideally podcast if I can, and just support people. And truthfully as well, a lot of people and friends that I talk to, just like you've picked up on, Wendy, have said, you know what, these 7 steps don't necessarily have to apply just to people who have had brain surgery, brain injury, and epilepsy. But I've got a friend who has had cancer years ago, but she again is trying to get her life back on track. And when I've talked to her about the things that I do, she says, oh, Luce, I want some of that, tell me more. And so I think you're right. I think it can just apply to so many people, just getting those steps right, getting your life back on track. And that's what I want to help people do, whatever they may or may not have gone through. So that's where we are, and I'm very excited.
I'm very excited for you as well. And we'll put a link in the show notes, because I think Lucy is going to do amazing things. And like I said, you know, whether it is the brain injury that connects you with her, or just her enthusiasm, then, you know, she can help us all. She really can. So we'll put those links in, and, you know, everyone needs to do your 7 steps. I think it's a great program. So well done you, and I'm really excited about the future for you. I'm going to do my quick fire round at the end. I've just got 2 more questions for you before we do that. Firstly, you're doing something very specific to commemorate your 10-year anniversary, aren't you? So, and this is a really big thing for you. So tell us what you're doing with your husband.
Yeah, so we are doing this 10K run together. And that for me is really big, because a lot of that just boils down to mindset. So even going back to when I was a dancer, and definitely after my surgery and, you know, illness years and depression and anxiety, I really thought that I could not run. And if I ran, it would be for like 2 minutes, and then I would stop and I'd be like, oh my goodness, I can't breathe at all. And I couldn't, I just was not a runner. So I pretty much made it my mission to be able to run. And interestingly, during COVID lockdown, week 1, my husband, who runs normally 3 times a week, but bless him, he's got shin splints, I think, at the moment. He said, right, come on, we're going to do this together. I'm going to run with you, however long it takes, and we're going to do 5K, 10K. And he took me out and pretty much forced me to do 5K straight off, which I did. And then I just kept on doing it. And now I've actually just rejoined the gym purely to do running on a treadmill, because it's getting cold and wet and dark outside. And yeah, I am literally hoping that come November the 22nd, it's a national thing. I'm going to be doing 10K in a park somewhere with my husband, and raising funds for the Yorkshire Brain Tumour charity. Fantastic. In Headingley.
Oh, well done. We'll put a link to that. Well done for you. Well,
thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm in lectures that day. Otherwise, I'm not a natural runner either. But I will be supporting you. I will be thinking about you, and I'll be cheering on for the day. So well done you. That's brilliant. And the other question that I just very briefly, and I think this could be a really big question, but I'm going to very briefly is something that I hadn't thought about that you said earlier in the podcast was about viruses, and how you have to be quite careful of viruses. And obviously with everything that's going on in the minute, that must be a pretty sort of scary time for you. So have you been, well, you've obviously been running a little bit, which is great for your health and well-being, but how are you getting on with that then, with everything that's going on?
Well, it is really quite interesting. So a few things here. First of all, when we went into lockdown, I was pretty much classed as vulnerable, because with epilepsy, you know, obviously you don't want to have seizures, and when you have any virus, it can trigger seizures. And also, I'm asthmatic, believe it or not, so that's another reason to self-isolate. So yeah, it was kind of self-isolate. And my where I work, we are all working from home, so we're fortunate in that respect. So yeah, I had to be really, really careful, and wasn't going out to the shops, etc. But what I really found, and I want to say this with compassion for people that are going through it, because my mum had COVID. She didn't tell us because she was so scared to upset us and we couldn't get to her, but she told us afterwards. But I think she's got COVID fatigue, bless her. So anyway, I want to be really compassionate. But what I noticed about myself, and maybe this is how I can help people, is that everything that people in society are going through now, you know, the kind of massive impact in their lives, the changes, the job situation, the relationships, the loneliness, the health factor. I have been going through this for 10 years. And when I got my answers last year, and then really put into practice these 7 steps that totally work for me, and I maintain them pretty much I call them daily disciplines. So I do these things daily to ensure I'm healthy and well. So the whole lockdown time for me was almost like my personal recovery period, where the stress from traveling had gone. And what I'm trying to say is I'd gone through what I think everybody is sensing at the moment for 10 years by myself, is how it felt. And so now during the lockdown was when I was able to have that final recovery period. And I feel like I've actually gained strength and contentment and kind of momentum, and I'm happier and healthier and more healed than ever before. And now I think that's how I might be able to help people, because I know how people are feeling, and it's isolating at times and it's painful, and we're isolated from family and friends at times. I know how that feels, you know. So for me, COVID has been an odd one. It's been sad and seeing what's happening to others and society and all the deaths, of course, but it's also made me think, oh my goodness, I'm through this and I am well, and can hopefully help others become as well as possible too.
Great. That's a great point to leave it on. I think that's perfect. We could go on for hours. There's loads of stuff I want to ask you, but maybe I'll get you on again. So we're going to just do.
Please do.
Oh, brilliant! So we're just going to really do the quick fire round. So I just want, what food reminds you of childhood?
Beans on toast. And believe it or not, with my family that are like amazing cooks. But yeah, beans on toast.
Yeah, you can't beat it, can you? Like a jacket potato with beans as well. It's kind of like proper comfort food,
yeah.
isn't it?
Cheese.
Yeah,
Absolutely, definitely.
And the most memorable meal you've ever had, in a positive way. I always have to add that just in case.
Most positive meal. Oh gosh. Oh, well, I don't want to brag, but living in Dubai, you know, the Burj Al Arab Hotel in the middle of the sea. Well, my best friend Shelley, who I mentioned before that I was dancing with and sharing the cabin on the cruise ship, her parents came to stay with us in Dubai, and they took us there for afternoon tea. And we kind of saw the sunset as well. And the afternoon tea just kind of kept coming. You know, it wasn't just a round of tea and cake. It was ongoing, and it was just gorgeous. The food and the view.
And the view.
Yeah. And the company.
And the company. This is the thing for me, is whenever anyone answers that question, what I love is that it's never just the food. It's always the experience and what goes with it. And that's what I love most about food, is that whole experience. So thank you. I can visualize that myself. So it's lovely. Maybe one day. I've never actually been to Dubai, so maybe I need to put that on the list.
Definitely do.
Yeah, definitely. You're selling it to me. And my final question of the day is, what have you got for tea?
Ooh, that is a good question. Do you know, I'm probably going to have a big smoothie when I come back from the gym. I'm at the gym tonight. I'm doing another 5K. I'll eat my carbs before I go, and I'll have my protein when I come back.
When you get back.
So, yeah. So not massively planned. Sorry, that was probably quite a boring answer. If you'd have asked me last night, it would have been Arab meatballs and rice and salad and beautiful things. Tonight it's a shake.
Well, I'm not coming for tea tonight, but I might have come last night if I'd have been invited, that's for sure.
It was good. I should share that recipe with you, actually. I think you'll like it.
Brilliant. Please do. It sounds lovely.
Yeah.
Lucy, you've been absolutely fabulous. It's been lovely to talk to you. I hope that you sharing your journey will help others. And I love your 7 steps. It's really inspiring. And we will put a link to all of your social media and everything in the show notes. So thank you so much. And yeah, don't run too fast at the gym, eh? Take it easy.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And believe me, I am not running that fast at the moment. Thank you, Wendy. Thanks, you.
Thanks, Lucy. Wow. Yeah, what do you think? So I've put a link in the show notes. So pop to the show notes. That's hillstart.me.uk/58 for all of the show notes. Lucy Rose Coaching. What an incredible story, and what an incredible lady. I'm so honoured to have her on the podcast. I could have asked her so many more questions and talked to her for ages, but do check her out. Pop over to social media, and maybe we'll get her on again in the future. And while I still have you guys, if I could just say thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And if you have the time, why not pop over to iTunes and give me a review? It really means a lot to me. I do say thank you to everyone who leaves a review, and I give them a shout out, and it helps other people find the show as well. So if you've got the time, I do really appreciate it. And if not, tell your friends and family about it, and maybe we can all join me next week. It's a solo episode next week, and I'm going to be talking about the 5 things that I eat that will surprise you, and the 5 things that I don't eat that might surprise you. So tune in next week for more of that. And all I've got to say to you now is, what have you got for tea?